Pause a moment and feel the room change. 3 years to the day since Britain whispered its last goodbye, the palace lights are softer, the memories sharper, and one short caption from a son to his mother carries more weight than 1,000 speeches. Remembering Queen Elizabeth II, 1926 to 2022. No flourish. No flourish needed. If you're here for this kind of measured, grown-up royal analysis, less noise, more meaning, hit like and subscribe. This channel is built for you. Grief keeps its own calendar. For most families it's a photograph on the mantel and a chair left empty at Sunday lunch. For this family it's a wreath in St. George's Chapel, the hush of the quadrangle, a nation that still lowers its voice when it says her name. Elizabeth II anchored a complicated century with an uncomplicated promise. I will be there. She kept it for 70 years. Constancy is why her reign sits so cleanly in our minds, no posture, no politics. Just the discipline of neutrality in public and the discipline of kindness in private. She made the institution look effortless by choosing, relentlessly, to be the least interesting person in the room when the Constitution required it. And that's the hinge that makes the next chapter interesting. Charles III did not arrive as a blank page. He arrived with the margins full of notes in the ink the press once called black spider. Long before net zero lived on ministerial letterheads, he was out in fields talking about soil, hedgerows, floodplains, crop rotation, warning that the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago, the second best is now. He funded pilots, convened scientists, wrote to ministers, got mud on his shoes. To some it felt like conscience, to others interference. Both feelings can be true at once. Inside the palaces the conversation was always quieter than the headlines. Courtiers fretted, gently, that the then Prince of Wales was getting ahead of his skis palace for. You're right about the destination, but mind the gradient. The late Queen's Counsel, boiled down by those who understood her method, was simpler still. Don't write to ministers. Not because the subjects were unworthy, but because the sovereign's most potent tool is silence. When a monarch speaks, even privately, the room stops being level. Elizabeth II grasped that gravity better than anyone and used it sparingly. It protected her, more importantly, it protected the crown. And yet the record we now take for granted did not grow in thin air. Organic farming, dismissed as crankish in the 1980s, is orthodoxy now. Traditional building, urban green space, nature-based flood control, all filed under eccentric, when he began, all mainstream today. You can believe, as many sensible people do, that those letters crossed a line and still admit the line itself shifted, because someone kept pointing to it. The puzzle of this reign is how to carry that energy without tipping the scales. So far, the adjustment has been deliberate. The campaigner became a convener. The king hasn't abandoned the subjects that shaped his life, he has changed the verbs. Less argue, more gather. Less pressure, more presence. You can hear it in the diary. Summits he hosts rather than harangues, receptions that lend spotlight, not opinion, speeches that frame urgency as duty, not party. In garden tents he now asks the question, and lets the scientist answer it into every microphone. It's a subtle shift, but constitutional monarchy is built of subtleties. Remember Bakehott's old distinction between the dignified and the efficient parts of the Constitution. Modern soft power lets the dignified do quiet work the efficient cannot. A state banquet seating plan that places rivals shoulder to shoulder. A Windsor Round Table that coaxes business, civil society, and government into the same sentence. A royal patronage that turns an unfashionable pilot into a bankable project. None of it explodes on the evening news, all of it, over a decade, alters what's possible. That's the register. Charles has learned to play, a note you feel more than hear. There's a Commonwealth layer, often missed. The network isn't a voting bloc, it's a conversation. Under Elizabeth II, continuity was the gift. Under Charles III, convening may be the contribution, ministers, indigenous leaders, farmers and financiers in rooms that don't otherwise exist. So a mangrove, or a peat bog becomes not only a habitat, but an asset class worth protecting. You can dislike the jargon and still admire the result, nature left standing, because spreadsheets finally see its value. None of this is a criticism of his mother, or a defense of every memo he ever sent. Different temperaments, different ages, one job. Elizabeth's method was to efface the self, so the role could shine. Charles's is to harness a lifetime's expertise, and then padlock the door marked policy. Both serve the same end, an institution that endures by refusing to be dragged into the daily brawl. Watch what happens when headlines get hot. Under this king, as under the last, the palace answers with schedule, not statement. That's not timidity, that's the Constitution doing its work. The human thread matters too. A son marks his mother's anniversary with a caption and a photograph. A country remembers the morning its breath caught. A family that has never been ordinary does the most ordinary thing in the world and misses someone. In that light the arguments shrink to scale. We can cherish the late Queen's serenity and accept that her air was shaped by different urgencies. The oil shocks and river die-offs of the 1970s, the farm crises of the 1980s, the early climate warnings of the 1990s. His worldview isn't a hobby, it's the biography of a generation in public life. Those black ink letters, the ones that made civil servants shift in their chairs, are artifacts of that biography. They also taught a lesson clearly absorbed. When you become sovereign, you trade the freedom to lobby for the power to host. It is not a lesser power. Ask a diplomat what moves more: policy over 10 years, a pointed memo, or a palace reception that glues an awkward coalition together with soft pressure and good silver. Soft power is soft in texture, in effect, it's granite. Look one click closer, and you see how the family system supports that balance. The Prince and Princess of Wales keep working at human height, early years, mental health, earthshot, the trestle table projects that make national policy feel local. The Princess Royal remains the metronome of duty. The courtiers, the unfashionable professionals, translate grand themes into line-by-line diaries that keep the sovereign away from tripwires. It isn't glamorous, any more than a keel is glamorous, but it stops the ship from capsizing. Which leaves us here, on an anniversary that felt quiet and right. A king who, today of all days, understood that the most eloquent thing he could do was to say very little. A memory of a queen who turned silence into strength rather than absence. An institution that has made the handover without losing its balance. The late sovereign honored, the current one restrained, the heir and his wife building patiently at human scale, service without fuss. Continuity isn't the enemy of change, it's the condition that makes change safe. The monarchy survives because it keeps scale. It knows when to fill the frame, and when to step back, so the country can see itself. On a day like this, the frame is full enough, a caption, a date, a reign that steadied millions. The debates about advocacy and letters and lines are real and worth having, but they are footnotes to a truth that carries us from one generation to the next. The work goes on, and it goes on inside guardrails the late Queen built and her son respects. If that balance matters to you, if you'd rather your royal news arrive with a clear head and a steady voice, tap like, share this with the one friend who always reads to the end and subscribe. Then tell me, below, where you stand on the question at the heart of today's story. Did the king's early activism help move the country to a better place? Or did it risk the neutrality that makes the crown useful? And has he found the right register now? Your comments make these conversations richer. Thanks for watching, and for keeping the tone as thoughtful as the subject deserves.